And this is MPR News. I'm Mike Mulcahy. It's Friday. That means we're talking about Minnesota politics this hour. And what a week it was. More than 900,000 people voted on Tuesday in the primary. Not quite a record turnout, but close. They chose candidates for governor, U.S. Senate, Congress, sorting out some hotly contested races. We're going to take one last look back at the primary and then look ahead to the general election today. Joining me in the studio are our political analysts, DFLer Todd Rapp and Republican Maureen Shaver. We'll talk to a couple of the winners in some of those primary races for Congress later in the hour. Todd Rapp, Maureen Shaver, thanks for coming in today.
Good morning.
Good to see you, Mike.
I hope you have caught up on your sleep by now after Tuesday night.
Just a little bit.
It could have been later, I guess.
Yes.
Let's start with the turnout. 902,000, give or take a few. The highest raw number since 1982, according to Secretary of State Steve Simon. That breaks down to about 580,000 Democrats and about 320,000 Republicans. Does anything stand out about those numbers to you? And Todd, let's start with you.
Well, first of all, I believe it was the single largest turnout of DFL voters in any primary in state history. While I'm not a big believer that primary day determines much about general election day, certainly both parties should be proud. They both exceeded their previous high in this century by about 150,000 votes, and that's good for both sides. Clearly, people are interested in this campaign. Hopefully, we'll have well more than 2 million voters for the general election, and if that happens, I think it will be very good for Minnesota.
Maureen, what do you think about that big turn?
I think the Republicans were surprised. I think both the Johnson campaign and the Pawlenty campaign thought that it would be closer to 225,000. I think former Governor Pawlenty was hoping for a big turnout. The irony of it all was that the Johnson team wanted a lower turnout because they thought that would help them. And frankly, Jeff Johnson outperformed. He used every one of those votes, and frankly, he was ahead almost throughout the state. So the 300,000 turnout, they're still trying to piece together who is that? Who showed up that didn't show up 4 years ago?
Have you gone over the numbers at all to see where there was, surprisingly big turnout, or was it pretty much a general phenomenon?
Well, I think generally speaking, turnout was higher throughout the state. The counties I kind of look at for benchmarks were typically we were seeing turnout that exceeded 25%. I think it was interesting that in the first congressional district and that there seemed to be stronger Democratic turnout in the east side, a little stronger Republican on the west side. That'll be interesting to see if that continues for the general election. But overall, I think it was throughout the state there is more interest in politics this year.
Just because of the competitive races or other factors at work?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Obviously, President Trump inspires a lot of people to debate politics. He has his strong supporters and his strong opponents. And I also just think that it's a change of the guard.
What about you, Maureen? What do you think?
I also think the president is part of the reason that we had a strong turnout. But ironically, I think Republicans thought that it might be a little lower turnout. And it's clear that Republicans are very engaged. And Jeff Johnson was able to take advantage of that. He took the base of the Republican Party and built on that. And I think we're all trying to figure out now were there new Trump voters or Trump voters from 2 years ago that might have been Democrats? Were they independents? Who are these people that are adding to the Republican base?
Do you think it'll carry over into the general?
I think what's going to be interesting, as Todd and I always talk about, that's a new election. It's a new time, and lots can happen between now and then. And we still only had 900,000. That was a good turnout, but we're going to have twice as about 2 million, 2.5 million. Yeah, turnout. So we're going to double that, and doubling that engages a lot more voters. And so that's what these campaigns are trying to figure out right now. But I don't think we should, both the Walz campaign and the Johnson campaign, we're just trying to get through that primary, and they're just starting fresh. And they're starting fresh out of the gates very strong. They're having 3 forums in the next 24 hours, today up in Nisswa, tonight, I believe, on Almanac, and tomorrow at the Game Fair. And that's a lot of contact with your new opponent. And I think it just shows that people are going to be very engaged in this campaign.
I have to ask you about Keith Ellison. He won the primary for Attorney General fairly easily on Tuesday night, and this was after these allegations came out over the weekend from a former a woman he was in a relationship with. She accused him of physical abuse. He denies it, of course. How big of a problem is this for Keith Ellison in particular and for Democrats in general, Todd?
Well, I think the problem, obviously, it's a significant one for Keith Ellison politically because he's starting this race on the defensive, and a lot of people in Minnesota don't know him. For the Democratic Party as a whole, there's a couple of problems here. Number one is there a double standard? Al Franken held to one standard and Keith Ellison held to another. Is there a reason why this accuser doesn't seem to immediately have the support and belief of people? There's only one solution to this. Keith Ellison has to stand up and he has to answer the questions over and over again until the questions are done. He is the only person who can stand up and transparently and openly say what happened and deliver whatever apology he needs to deliver. And if he doesn't do that, he puts Tom Perez and Ken Martin, the national and the state party chair, in impossible positions where they have to step in and be the enforcers. And that's not their job, but they have to do that to protect their candidates. Ken Martin can't watch this campaign be about Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith and Tim Walz answering Keith Ellison questions. They've got their own issues that they have to debate with their opponents. And so, I mean, in the end, if Ellison doesn't step up pretty quickly, Tom Perez and Ken Martin won't have a choice. But trust me, they don't want to be in that position. They want Keith to put this behind him and then be able to debate the issues that should face the Attorney General in any campaign.
Well, Keith Ellison did run in this primary without the DFL endorsement, as did Tim Walz, and Democrats are meeting tomorrow in Cambridge to decide whether to endorse them now that they've won. Do you think Keith Ellison will get that endorsement tomorrow?
I couldn't predict what the Central Committee would do when I worked for them, let alone now what they're going to do tomorrow. But he is certainly going to, if he's able to get their support, he's going to hear a strong minority pushback. And remember, it's not, while it is very much about the questions that Me Too has asked, it's also about the fact that he is the state's leading prosecutor if he's elected. That is a very special position, and therefore it's not surprising that the scrutiny he will get for this issue might be stronger than any other candidate would get.
Maureen, what's your take on all this?
Well, I want to say that again. He is running to be the top law enforcement official in the state. That's different. That's different than running for Secretary of State. That's different than running for governor. And so he is going to have to answer that question. I'm a little surprised because he has claimed that none of this happened, that he isn't appearing before all the media and taking every single question until people have no more questions to ask. To put this behind him. I think the DFL party is in a very difficult position. They would love to step out of tomorrow's state central committee meeting with the top of their ticket, Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith and Tim Walz, and the rest of the ticket locked arms, and this will prevent that.
If this video, which allegedly exists of the incident, were to come out after Ellison has denied this so strenuously, I would imagine that would be fairly devastating for him as a candidate. Is there any way for the Democrats to put someone else on the ballot if that were to happen?
Well, I'm no attorney here. When I read the statute, it said that the three ways of replacing a candidate are either they pass away, they've got a significant illness that's confirmed by two doctors, or if they're determined to be ineligible, and it lists specific state statutes where that's true. It may be that the only thing that can happen is the election goes forward, and if Keith Ellison were to win, then he'd have the choice about whether or not he'd serve in that office. The best way of preventing this is for Keith Ellison to openly and transparently address the questions. And it's going to be uncomfortable for a couple of days for him, absolutely. But the quicker that happens, the better this is going to be, not just politically, but also in dealing with this as an ethical, social issue.
I think the timings is very interesting here. I mean, this is a complicated question. I think we tried to answer it in 2017 with a new statute, and as Todd laid out the conditions. But I think it were early enough in the effort that someone might attempt a write-in. And so I think they do have to figure out this issue over the next 48 hours pretty quickly, and to the satisfaction of Democrats running all the way up and down the ballot. And I'm talking from governor and Senate to those running in the Minnesota House.
Maureen Shaver, Todd Rapp here. You know, several contested races for Congress were on the primary ballot. One of the most hotly contested was in the 8th District in northeastern Minnesota. There were 5 DFLers looking for the chance to run for the seat being vacated by DFL Congressman Rick Nolan. And the winner with 44% of the vote was former State Representative Joe Radinovich. And Joe Radinovich is with us now on the phone. Thanks for coming on. Congratulations.
I appreciate it, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing well. I'm right now. I'm trying to recharge my batteries here and hit the campaign trail again on Sunday. But on beautiful Lake Cabotogama, the northern part of our district here.
Sounds nice. Now, it was a long road to this nomination. How did you actually win it in the end? What did it for you?
You know, I think it was a message that united people across the district. If you look at the election results, we won in many places across a large district, and in the places where we didn't win, we came in second. And I think that speaks to, our ability to unite people around an economic message. I think folks know, whether they're in North Branch or Duluth or Brainerd or up on the Iron Range, that the economy is changing very fast, and that special interests, unfortunately, have had too big a seat at the table in Washington, D.C., and that's prevented a lot of the public policies that we know would help working people with those changes.
So what's the message as you head into the general?
The message is the same, right? That people are, hardworking people are facing tough times across the district. We've seen productivity in this country skyrocket, and at the same time, wages have been mostly flat for a number of decades. Working people are losing ground, and they have a sense that special interests are ruling the roost in Washington, D.C. We've got a president who, campaigned on draining the swamp, and as far as I can tell, he invited a bunch more swamp critters out there. So we need to make sure that we send somebody from this district to fight on behalf of working people in Washington, D.C., and that's what I intended to.
Well, as well as was Jim Hagedorn. He's a Republican running for Congress in the 1st District in southern Minnesota. He faced a primary challenge from State Senator Carla Nelson, but won fairly easily on Tuesday. And Jim Hagedorn joins me now. Mr. Hagedorn, congratulations. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
What was it that won it for you so convincingly on Tuesday?
Well, I think that we stood out as far as the conservative message to the Republican voters, and we were on the ground working all 21 counties for some time now. This is my 3rd time in a row on the ballot, and we had the party's endorsement with 76% on the first ballot. We have a lot of friends down here, and I think they're just ready for us to win.
Mm-hmm. What are the big issues that you'll stress now heading into the general election campaign?
Well, essentially, the Democrat Party, including our opponent, Dan Feehan, they've moved so far to the left, I always say, kind of like Reagan said about Mondale, they've left America. And the race sets up as a clear contrast. It doesn't matter. Every Democrat, major Democrat in this state is running as Keith Ellison. They're all for open borders. They're all for socialized medicine. They're all for gun control, late-term abortion, things like that. And we're on the other side. We want to keep moving the country in the right direction. I tell people I'm prepared to partner with President Trump to get that done in Washington, and the voters will have a clear choice.
As you mentioned, you've run a couple of times before, and you came pretty close to winning in 2016. President Trump ran strong in the district. Do you think support for him in the district has stayed strong, or will it be, more of a wind in your face instead of at your back this time around?
Well, I think people in southern Minnesota they like what they're seeing as far as the progress on the economy. They like what they're seeing as far as America regaining its standing around the world, rebuilding our military, getting rid of these onerous regulations like Waters of the United States, having pro-U.S. energy policies to keep downward pressure on the cost of energy, and to protect our basic rights. One of the big issues in the last campaign was who was going to control the Supreme Court. Was Hillary Clinton going to stack the court with radicals to take away our basic liberties? Or was Donald Trump going to put strict constructionists on the court to make sure that we were protected? So on all those counts, southern Minnesotans are pretty much a vast majority on those issues. They want to see secure borders. They want to make sure that our economy is humming, and they see the difference between the two parties.
Having run a few times against Tim Walz, what are you telling Republicans to expect out of him as Jeff Johnson runs against him for governor?
Well, Tim Walz has abandoned all of his positions that he took to get reelected in southern Minnesota. He used to want the NRA's endorsement. Now he's for gun control. He's a very far left politician. He always has been. We we kind of smoked him out in the last election. We came to 49.6% of the vote. Maybe that had a little bit to do with what he wanted to, move on and try for another race. But, Jeff Johnson's a great guy. He's worked very hard. He's a good conservative, but he's a common sense guy that wants to reform government. And I have every confidence in he and his team to get out here and meet the people and show the difference between, really a radical leftist and Walz and somebody who's going to be more common sense. And after these 8 years of the Dayton administration, with all the failures that the Democrats have piled up, the Obamacare, the MNsure problems, the things with the Somali daycare, the licensing tabs and all that, I think people are looking for competent leadership and a change at the top. So very confident that Jeff Johnson can get the job done.
On the other hand, the economy's doing pretty well. We saw in the news today Minnesota's unemployment rate, I think, an 18-year low and a full point below the federal unemployment rate.
Well, it doesn't have anything to do with the massive regulation coming out of St. Paul, the high tax policy here in Minnesota. I mean, look at the bill, and we're talking a lot about the governor's race instead of mine, but look at that bill that all our fine Republican legislators put together to make sure that we could conform with the national tax cut. And now Minnesotans are in a tough spot. So we'll let them deal with that. But down here in southern Minnesota, I think people are looking to keep the country moving the right direction. And our opponent is a far-left liberal, way more liberal than even Walz was when he ran down here. So I don't think that's going to fly.
Will you debate Dan Feehan? We'd love to have you do it on the air here someday.
Oh, heck. He called for 3 debates. I said, that's a little modest. That's only 1 per month coming up. That's not enough. We should have 8 or 10. It's a big district of 21 counties. Let's get to all regions of the district. I would love to debate on your program or any of the others on your network. I'd be happy to do it.
All right. Jim Hagedorn, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate the chance.
That's Jim Hagedorn. He's the Republican candidate for Congress in Minnesota's 1st District. Maureen, how do you size that one?